You're tuned into Zero Signal, a show about what they won't say and what you're probably already thinking. No fluff, no filters, no bullshit. Let's crack it open.
At this time, I'm going to ask you to fasten your seatbelts.
5G, to most people, it's just another little icon on their phone screen. A new bar of service. Maybe faster downloads, maybe not. But the truth is, 5G has been marketed as so much more than that. We're talking about the fifth generation of cellular networks, a technology that's supposed to be the backbone of the future. Now think about it. Cars that drive themselves, and a need to communicate in milliseconds to avoid collisions like we see in Teslas. Doctors performing surgery from thousands of miles away, their hands mirrored by robotic arms with no lag. Entire cities built on connected sensors, streetlights, power grids, transit systems, all talking to each other in real time. That's the dream of 5G. Speed, reliability, capacity. The ideal that it could transform society itself, not just how fast you can stream Netflix on a bus, but you also get fears just as large. Some of those fears live on the fringe, where conspiracy theories thrive. You probably remember when people claimed 5G towers were spreading COVID-19, and some even set those towers on fire. Others believe 5G weakens the immune system, or perhaps worse, that it's a tool for mind control and mass surveillance. Those theories might sound extreme, but they caught fire online, especially in moments when trust in government and institutions was really fraying. And then there are the more mainstream concerns, the ones that don't sound like science fiction, but are just as unsettling. Building a 5G network requires dense infrastructure with towers and small cells everywhere, raising questions about cost, privacy, and surveillance. The US and China have fought bitterly over who controls the technology, because whoever builds the pipes controls the flow of data. And with faster, deeper connections, the potential for governments and corporations to watch us, to monetize us, only grows stronger. So when we talk about 5G, it's not just about faster speeds on your phone. It's about power. Who has it, who loses it, and what the future looks like when the infrastructure of connection itself is up for grabs. So Jay, let me ask you a question. When you hear the word 5G, do you think we're looking at really a genuine revolution or just another layer of control dressed up as progress?
So that's a great question. I honestly think, like with any technology, they release it to you with these grandiose promises of enlightenment, making your life better, faster, easier, but ultimately it ends up being used to control you. I think it's great. We have it on our phones. It gives great internet service. We can stream video effortlessly. We can listen to our podcast. It's good. But I think a part of the control grid that they're going to be building here probably in the next 5 to 15 years. But yeah, so that's where I'm at with it.
What I think I want to preface this conversation with is 5G and what actually it is our customers understand what we're talking about. I think 5G sounds like some mysterious new force floating in the air, but at its core, it's really simple. It's radio waves, the same kind of invisible waves that carry music to your car radio or connect your Wi-Fi. The only difference really is that frequency, particularly what station your phone and tower are tuned into. I think about it like this. 4G mostly used lower bass notes. They traveled far and pushed through walls, but they don't carry as much information. 5G adds the higher, treble-like notes. They carry way more data, but they don't travel as far and can get blocked through these buildings and trees and rain that you see. That's why 5G really needs a lot more antennas. Not just a few giant towers that you see in the distance, but mini towers that are spread over rooftops and across streets, and you start to see these towers pop up everywhere. Smaller in size, but they increase the density of the way the frequencies are traveling. Now, when we see these start to pop up, and maybe back in the day, a radio tower's up and you didn't pay much mind because you're driving down the road and you had a cellular tower there, perhaps it was getting lost in the sauce with the electrical grid, but now you're seeing these things everywhere. And as you were sharing with me pre-show, you were showing me this sign, and we can include it on our website, but it was a sign that says these 5G devices can actually cause harm. And a lot of people are saying that is making them sick. Early stages, it was connected to COVID-19, but I still think there's some real theory where it could actually still cause you some medical harm. Maybe not COVID-19, but perhaps some type of other illness. Just like holding your phone that's probably carrying 5G cellular service when you're not connected to the phone satellites. They say don't place it near your groin. Like I used to stick it under my leg when I would drive my car all the time. Like they say it can cause cancer. That's not just the battery in the phone. It's all the signals that are constantly passing it through it. Much like when we were kids, they say don't stand in front of the microwave because it would cause cancer. It's all these invisible rays, all these invisible beams that are occurring that really messing up with your body's ecosystem and making you sick. So I do think there's some reality behind this. And more importantly, it's right in our face. Like you could have these 5G towers anywhere. Have you seen any research where folks are complaining about getting sick from these radio towers?
Yeah, I actually watched an interesting YouTube video, and it was a bunch of scientists. I think they were testifying. I sent you the link so we can put it in the show notes. But they were talking about the possibility of some of these radio frequency waves like, giving people cancer. There's also some evidence that it can kind of mess with your brain waves a bit, which is interesting. But I'm sitting in my house right now. I have a cell phone next to me. I'm talking to you on my laptop, which is connected to Wi-Fi. And I guarantee you 95% of my neighbors have the same setup going through their house. So I almost feel like you can't even walk through your neighborhood or drive through your city without being blasted by a ton of these waves. You're just constantly bombarded with it. But we can get down the rabbit hole a little bit further. But I think that the next step, which is I think scary, is 6G. And we can touch on G a little bit down the line of the show. But I think 5G is just that first step to kind of transition over to that 6G. I think once you get to the 6G, we're talking about the ability for them to like project holograms, to really get super in depth with the autonomous driving. A lot of this technology is really set up for factory use, the autonomous factories, the robots that build the cars or whatever else. And these waves can travel 2,000 to 3,000 feet. So that's why even that's about a half a mile, give or take. I was watching some stories about them putting these 5G towers on every other phone pole, like 200 to 300 feet apart. And like you said, it is better for urban close-knit environments, but the benefit of it is, like you said, the speed. There's very little latency, and it has a ton of capacity to support a lot of devices and users during it. And I guess the one thing that they promote is that it's energy efficient. There's that kind of narrative where you're trying to save Earth and prevent climate change and save you money. Like they always put something in there to make you feel good about yourself, to make you think you're going to save a few bucks. When in reality, with all these AI plants going up, your water bill is going to skyrocket just to keep the servers cool. Your power bill is going to skyrocket because there's going to be so much demand on the system that you're going to be paying stupid amounts of money. Like none of this is for our good, unless you're Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos and you want a completely connected and controlled world. And you have billions of dollars that you don't have to worry about any of this crap.
Yeah, it's always the climate perspective, unless it comes to profiting. A lot of people say, and Sam Altman said himself, is that every prompt you put into ChatGPT requires a tablespoon of water. That's how much water they go through for every single time you ask ChatGPT a question. Now you scale that over millions of users, send in prompts to the system thousands of times a day. Like we're going through some water, and that's not good for the climate, but nobody cares about it because
they don't
it
care about
helps
that.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually when we talk about the health impacts that we hear, I was talking to one of my doctor friends online and just trying to do some preliminary research in reference to the topic. And I asked him, like, have you ever heard of anything that would make people sick? Because I was telling him about some of the conspiracy theories were out there. He said that there was nothing really proven, but there's a lot of probabilities. And one of the things he said that some people report headaches, fatigue, sleep disturbances, or dizziness when exposed to Wi-Fi. He said 4G or 5G. The World Health Organization classifies it as a reported condition. Studies haven't found consistent evidence that radio waves directly cause these systems. But he says people feel it, and it's really a perception that kind of fuels those fears. And in fact, I think it's somewhere in West Virginia, there is actually a community that has no Wi-Fi because there's all these people that have electromagnetic hypersensitivity. So they cordon it off. Like they turn it into this vault where they don't have the signals. And they have the old school telephones and no real cell phone. The other thing he says is cancer concerns. He said the International Agency of Research on Cancer, or the IARC, classifies radio frequencies and electromagnetic fields as possible carcinogen to humans. That research goes back to 2011. He said the same category is in the same category whereas like vegetables and coffee that are mass produced like through fire. So a lot of carcinogens leans towards things that are being burnt. Like those are the carcinogens. Like when you smoke a cigarette, the carcinogens are then burnt tobacco that you actually inhale. But that, though they say if it's possible to cause cancer, he says still there's not enough information out there that actually do. But that's one of the reasons why they plaster it on 5G devices, because it is a possible carcinogen that could cause cancer. And the next thing he said is fertility and development. He goes, some animal studies suggested possible effects of long-term high-level exposure on sperm quality and the embryonic development. He goes, as these really debated, they feed into the claims that 5G could really affect reproductive health. And lastly, he mentioned skin heating. He goes, D, especially at higher like millimeter wave frequencies, is absorbed mostly by the skin and the outer layers of the eye. He goes, critics worry that long-term dense exposure might cause localized heating. He goes, official limits are set far below harmful levels, but the concept of energy heating the skin is what like most people talk about. That's what they fear. Just talking to him briefly, it's somebody I've known for 10 years, but talking to him briefly, it's pretty interesting. They're starting to hear about all these health benefits that are known in the medical community, but I bet they didn't tell you that when they installed your internet router at your home.
Yeah, man, it's a little bit suspect. Like per usual, like you type into Google or whatever AI system you like to use, and it says WHO finds no consistent evidence of cancer or all these negative side effects. But the word that sticks out to me is consistent. So when you say that, then there have been studies done, and there's hundreds of scientists out there that have evidence and proof that these G waves, especially in the areas that are super dense with these towers, can actually kill trees, kill bugs, harm the human body. Cancer has exploded in the past 20, 30 years. And what kind of came around in the past 20, 30 years? Cell phones, all this technology, this internet. And it's interesting, on that YouTube video I watched, the guy held up a brochure from Verizon, and the Verizon brochure warns of potential electromagnetic radiation, and when you sign these terms and contracts, that you don't hold them liable for potentially getting sick. So why would you put that in there if it was completely safe? It's not like a TV. You don't have a contract with your TV saying before you buy this TV, you have to, because it's not really emitting. It's got Bluetooth and you can hook it up to Wi-Fi, but it's really just projecting light. But all these towers are sending out these 24 to 100 gigahertz signals, and part of me thinks, because 5G kind of works on 3 different bands, it works on like a low band, which is like less than a gigahertz. So I doubt you're going to experience a lot of issues around that. But most of the activity happens on like the 1 to 6 gigahertz range. And then they have a high level range of 24 to 100 gigahertz. So they kind of ramp this up and down depending on what they're doing. And you see the 5G warning stickers all over the towers, and you're not allowed to work on them unless you have some sort of RF protection, because the higher you crank it up, the more you can get burned. Like if you were to stick your hand in a microwave or something, like it's just going to travel through your body, and it's going to, just like x-rays, they travel through your body. If you get exposed to enough in a short period of time, like you end up developing cancer. It breaks down your DNA, it causes alterations. I don't know, man. This stuff's pretty scary. I think there's probably other technologies that could be used to not really put us at that kind of exposure.
Yeah, one of the things you told me is you need protection. It'd be interesting to understand like how close you need to be to these towers in order to start to don this protective gear. And it reminds me of a story. It occurred in 19. A woman in Sacramento claimed she could hear G towers. Like she could hear the buzzing that was coming off of them. Not just really in a sense of hearing the equipment humming, but that her body picked up the frequencies like an antenna. She's described nights where her ears rang with the electronic buzz, her skin prickled. She felt a constant low-grade panic, as if she was like standing next to this giant speaker nobody else could really hear. She wasn't alone. Online forums are really filled with people calling themselves EMF refugees, claiming they have to live in cabins, deserts, or these old mining towns just to escape what they described as this constant invisible storm. And that kind of reminds me, it's like, how close do you need to be? Because some of these radio towers, especially as we expanded into 5G, they're at greater density within a square mile. And how close is safe? Like, how close is safe for us? I don't know if you know the answer to that. I don't. Just wonder, should they be telling us where they're putting these 5G towers?
I think the problem is that they just spring up overnight. So they're putting them on top of telephone poles in certain areas. I'm sure eventually the whole entire United States is going to be covered with them every 3 400 feet. But I was listening to one guy talk on that podcast, on that YouTube video when he was talking to the government, and he was saying it's a variable thing. So if like you're on the low band at 1 gigahertz, like, you can be right up on it. Nothing's really going to happen to you. But if you crank that sucker up to 100 gigahertz, you're going to start burning. You're going to start having the sensation on your skin, like you said, your eyes. You're going to have some sort of interaction. So I think at the moment, like everything is between that in that mid band, like between 1 and 6 gigahertz. So there's not a ton of output, but what happens if someone cranks that up? What happens if somebody decides, okay, these people are out of control, let's crank it up and just make them all feel crazy or feel this sensation? And it was interesting. I was listening to some Israeli guy give a speech about 5G, and he was saying that I think the way that you ever hear of the microwave guns that the military uses to kind of disperse crowds? He was saying right around 90 gigahertz, they noticed that they pointed this at people, they would start burning and they run away. And as soon as they got outside of the range of the frequency, they were essentially fine, other than they were tripped out as to what the heck just happened. So they know the frequency range of which they need to apply to cause somebody some distress. But he was saying typically around 100 feet, if it's cranked up, you don't want it. If it's cranked up to 100 gigahertz, done 100 feet, you're going to start feeling some weird sensation.
So essentially, we have giant weapons dispersed throughout our neighborhood. And as much as I've seen that the Chinese are hacking our infrastructure, I wonder if somebody could hack into these towers, change the frequency to cause real damage to folks.
It's interesting in the espionage perspective because Highway, it's a big company in China. They're the biggest manufacturer of 5G equipment. Most of the stuff we get is from China. Again, there you go. And it's known that there's backdoor kill switches in these. So what happens if there's war? Just flip the switch. All your 5G towers are down. Now you're not communicating. Now you're not making phone calls unless you're hooked to satellite. It's scary. If you're broadcasting the signal, I find it hard to believe you can't tell what the people are using the signal for. Like we have all kinds of AI now. There's all kinds of data servers that are tracking all your cookies and all your website history, probably recording your phone calls. There's been countless stories about the government, NSA, CIA, whoever. And I'm sure if we got it, Britain has it, Chinese have it, Israelis have it. They can just slip on in and look at your phone, take control without you even knowing it, listen to your phone conversations. It's nuts, man. We like to talk about the one world order, and this is a way just to exert control and make sure your populace is obeying and doing what you tell them to do. And if not, let's crank up that 5 or 6G. Well, I think the real weapon's 6G.
Yeah.
Let's crank it up and burn them up a little bit, make them feel a little uncomfortable.
It reminds me of the Predator we used in law enforcement. That was his code name for it. But essentially, it was this antenna that we used, like this handheld kind of antenna thing. It looked like you would beam a signal to. We would carry it around and track people on their cell phones, and it would give a close proximity. Back in the day, and we're talking a long time ago now, because I've been out of law enforcement for 8-9 years, but I could say if I was trying to track you down, Jay, and I didn't know where, and maybe I knew where you lived, but I was trying to execute a search warrant, and I was just looking for you as a person, I could take the Predator, go down the street, scan it, and it would be such a high accuracy that I could say, you're in the top level of your house. So if I'm knocking on your door to arrest you, you're not answering the door, I would take the information from the Predator, go write a search warrant, and I would kick in your front door and go get you. And it would always track the people down. At least it would track their phone down. A lot of that had to do with mobile bands that were bouncing off like radio towers and different things. And some of it, as I started seeing incorporated as I was getting, it was tracking the 5G signals that were on people's cell phone as well.
Yeah. No, man, I had never heard about that. That's pretty interesting. What do you make of the Highway, or I don't know how you say that, Highways company in China making all the G transmitters? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Chinese make very good products. As I said, I lived in Hong Kong. I've traveled a lot through China. They make very good products. With that being said, they do steal a lot of technology and they steal a lot of information. I remember trying to transfer the border many times because there's different set of rules in Hong Kong versus mainland China. And because I was an executive at my company, they would always stop and search me. I would spend so long trying to cross the border because they wanted to dump the contents of my laptop. And every time I would do it, I'd make sure I bring a dummy laptop so I would have no information on it, nothing they could steal. And they eventually figured it out, and they'd get so pissed off at me because I would sit there for 3 hours trying to hop the border and they couldn't get anything off of me. I think all Chinese devices, at least to some extent, are manufactured with some form of spyware. And they're not the only country that does it, but I think it can be consistently compromised if you're getting a device from China. And I think they could weaponize it against us if we were ever to go to war, which is significant. It's not the only country, like I said. Talking to one of my friends that was former CIA back in the day, he goes, just like Air France. He's like, if you took a flight on Air France and you were going to Paris or wherever you were going, and you sat in first class, every first class seat was bugged. They were
Wow.
listening to everybody's conversation and recording it so that they could duplicate it. And France, right behind China, was the most people that stole information from citizens. And they do it to boost their GDP, to be able to sell it. Amazon was compromised in China and eventually run out of town by Alibaba as a direct replication of Amazon. And it was because they stole so much data and were able to just make the product their own. So I think just because there's so much corporate espionage that is occurring there, and a lot of it is like state sponsored, that you can just assume those devices you are getting have some type of spyware or remote access available to it.
Yeah, you're talking about Jack Ma from Alibaba.
Yep.
Something happened. China did something to that guy. He like just up and disappeared for years and years. Like he was pretty famous there for a bit. And I don't know. I think China told him to get lost. He did break. Yeah. So apparently like he gave some speech and then China decided to pose like a regulatory crackdown on businesses. And yeah, Jack Ma, I guess he was criticizing China's regulations and banks and he just up and like just disappeared. I'll have to look more into that story, but I remember some chatter about that.
Yeah, he up and disappeared, and then he returned on scene and fell in line, because if not, he was
Yeah.
probably going to lose his company. The reason why I know him is because I know Alibaba very well. Even here in the United States, when I was working at my former company, they were the largest builder of data centers in the world. But at times we had our independent data centers, and then we had data centers in co-located places. Co-located means is that this company A would have a data center in it. It'd be like this caged off environment. The next door would be a separate company, Apple or Google or whoever. It was just feeding off the fiber lines and microservices that they were producing at that time. But what was always interesting is at the company that I worked for, right next door, Alibaba always showed up. So they were right next to our data center through these cages. And as we were doing the security inspections, they had all their cameras pointed inside, like trying to point inside our facility. They had microphones up that were trying to record anything that employees were talking in there. And we had to defend against this. We were always trying to block their cameras, trying to mute their microphones. We came with policies where you couldn't talk inside because they were just trying to, I think the only purpose for them to be there was to collect information. And that's what you're seeing from a lot of these companies, like the cell phone manufacturer that came out of China, as well as it's not allowed to be sold in the United States. They shut down that production because all of their cell phones, which were really cool, it was like the latest iPhone 1 gazillion and about a quarter of the price, and it functioned greatly because it was basically a rip-off product, but on top of it, it had all this spyware and bloatware and things to eavesdrop on you. So none of your conversations were secure. And you usually see those trending analyses then when it comes out of the government, because how it was first stopped, like government employees couldn't use this cell phone provider, and eventually trickled into corporate executives and then eventually prevented it from entering the United States. But yeah, Jack Ma's an interesting character. Who knows what he's been through over there, but I think he fell into line to keep his good fortune.
Yeah, I bet. You want to touch on some of the conspiracy theories concerning 5G?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll go ahead and start with the first one, and it's probably the most popular and controversial one. G activated the COVID virus, or G was the tool to set off the vaccine. So when you got the vaccine for the COVID scare, there was a lot of conspiracy theories going around that these new 5G towers are going to activate whatever's in that vaccine and kill you or make you crazy or make you do something that you otherwise wouldn't do.
Yeah, so the specific conspiracy theory that I heard was vaccines plus G microchip kind of control, where COVID vaccines were secretly implemented with microchips, and those said microchips connected to 5G, which would allow governments and corporations to track and control people, to be able to study them, which is a fascinating theory. But I've also seen, like, you look at the vaccine, like files of different people getting inoculated online and stuff, and man, those computer chips must be really small. And I don't know that we have that nanotechnology, unless it's just publicity online too, and it's a covert op to show the pictures online that don't have the computer chips in them.
Yeah, I think the theory was that it was like nanotechnology, like these chips or whatever were like so microscopic that you really couldn't even find them. You'd be very hard pressed to find them under a microscope. But what is interesting is that 5G was rolled out in 2019.
Yeah.
So I can see how people can draw those conclusions like, oh, they're big push for 5G 2019. Arguably, it really wasn't studied all that well. It almost seems like sometimes they come up with a cool technology and they're like, wow, it can make internet faster, it can make communication faster. Let's just roll it out without really studying that.
Sure.
Like the vaccine a little bit. And it coincides with the 2019 pandemic. So one of the theories is that they've fired up a 5G tower in Wuhan and then it activated the virus and that's how it started to spread.
Yeah, I saw online they coined the story the night the towers burned. And this is how it goes. In the spring of 2020, the world locked down against COVID-19. A very different kind of fire spread across Europe. In the UK alone, more than 90 cell towers were set ablaze between April and May. Similar attacks erupted in Netherlands, Ireland, and Cyprus. They said the arsonists weren't just vandals, they were acting on behalf of the belief that 5G towers were either spreading the coronavirus or weakening people's immune system. They said on April 2nd, 2020, one of the first attacks was recorded in Birmingham, UK, and video quickly circulated online of the flames consuming a 70-foot mast. And this goes to the believers, these fires were an act of self-defense against these invisible weapons in the sky. And to outsiders, it was just a panic that turned into arson. A lot of people like to say the United States is full of conspiracy theories and we're a bunch of weirdos over here in the U.S. But this specific story is arsonists, what they coined as arsonists, burning down these G towers because people literally believed that it was causing COVID-19 during that time. I don't know if it did or didn't, but I think there are some real health concerns with them.
Yeah, I think a big problem too is I do think if you're in close enough proximity to like a 5G transmitter, or if you spend a lot of, even if you don't live next to one, but say you work next to one, I do think it has a possibility of kind of jacking your immune system up. And part of me thinks when they got rolled out in 2019, we kind of went through that whole pandemic. Maybe there was some sort of latent virus that most of us just didn't really have a good immunity for. And it really made it a lot worse than it really was supposed to be. But another interesting thing, though, I want to go back to the arsonists that you were talking about. If you just look up 5G towers like on TikTok or Instagram, these things erupt in flames and explode all the time. And it's also, I'm sure somebody somewhere decided that I'm going to save my neighborhood and burn the tower down. But a part of me thinks that it was relatively new technology. They pushed so many of them out so quickly all at once that, you know how it goes. You can't even get a house built without something being jacked up in your house and it's wood and drywall and some wires. Something that advanced, something that's brand new. I wonder if some of it just wasn't installed well, or the parts that they had in it weren't up to spec, meaning that I put part A in here. Crap, that part can't handle the heat that this thing is putting out. And so I would venture to say that a lot of those fires were just from the product being bad or from the installation being poor. So I go with that 95% were just the towers catching fire on their own, and the other 5% were these people thinking they're trying to be a hero.
Yeah, and I wonder if it has something to do with those frequencies. Like maybe they didn't have the frequencies set correctly, which were also causing more damage as they were trying to learn how close these towers need to be together, how high the frequencies need to be. I saw another story out of the Netherlands that occurred in 2018. They said the people woke to a bizarre and unsettling scene that hundreds of dead starlings scattered across the city park, which is a type of bird. Almost immediately, rumors took root. A post online that just days earlier, a secret G test had just been conducted nearby, and the radiation had literally dropped the birds out of the sky. Isn't that insane?
Dude, like when you talk about frequencies used in a lot, like music's tuned to 432 hertz, and it's been studied like that frequency can cause agitation and anxiety. So a lot of people kind of tune their music to 528 or different, like more calming frequencies. And apparently this frequency change happened, I don't know, maybe like 100 years ago. And nobody really knows why. There's conspiracy theories, and that's again for another show. Frequencies can really have a profound, unobservable effect on humans. You're not sure why you're feeling a certain way. You're not sure what's triggering certain emotions or just certain high states of anxiety or just not feeling good. And there's been a lot of, you ever hear like binaural beats and like hemisync and all that. So people use this to help calm people down or try to help your brain get in certain wave states. Frequency is, humans are very sensitive to it. And it makes me nervous with this 24 to 100 gigahertz like floating around. Like you're not really sure what you're passing through and you're not really sure what the effects are. And I do think it can have an effect on your immune system if you're prone to that sort of sensitivity.
Especially if you're vulnerable groups like the elderly or young kids that may have like weaker or underdeveloped immune systems, it seems like the harm to them could even be more severe. I remember seeing a news report where parents started protesting because they literally tried to put a 5G tower on top of an elementary school. And it's like, why would you, even if there's a small risk, like, why would you put it near a vulnerable group?
Hey, a part of me wonders, we're so regulated in this country, and it seems like the regulation is really just meant for the small business owner. I feel like if you're a massive corporation and you come out with some sort of technology, the government's like, yeah, whatever, do whatever you want. Let's see if it works. There's no regulation for them other than like you got to slap a sign on it just in case. Maybe people should stay away from it. But and also, you probably see them down where you live, but I see it when I drive down through Baltimore and like DC. Like what looks like massive pine trees, they look like those fake temporary Christmas trees where you put like the branches on. But if you look at them close enough, you'll see the antennae coming out of them, and they're designed to look like trees to try to make the environment look a little bit more clean. I saw those. I saw that for the first time a few years ago. I'm like, what the heck is that? It just it blew my mind.
Yeah, it's scary stuff. And I just wish that there was more public knowledge about the subject matter so that we could weigh our risk. I feel like we're talking almost about Project Bluebeam now because it's stuff you can't see, but it's impacting you and it could potentially cause adverse side effects. And as you mentioned, like it always seems there's less regulation when you have money and power. I know like a big fight in Maryland is the power grids collapsing because of essentially the Green New Deal that's been implemented in Maryland. And my electric bill's $500 a month and we don't even use that much AC or anything because it's just so constrained. And they're having to build new infrastructure to support the power demands. And a lot of what they're doing over here is just in eminent domain. Like they're just taking people's property, they're building these power lines and they're just going it. And there's a lot of people in rural Maryland that are fighting back against it, just much they did in Europe, fighting back against these 5G towers. And they're getting these workers, sadly, just out there doing their job. They're getting death threats. People are pulling guns on them and they're threatening their lives. And now where the line workers go out there to install the infrastructure have to be escorted by police officers because they're just afraid to do their job. So we're wasting resources to escort those folks out there and do it. But it all comes back to because the energy grid in Maryland is essentially privately owned. Like it's owned by these corporations that have a lot of money, a lot of power. They want to run up your electric bill. And now the government's cooperating with them to make sure, and obviously electricity is needed, and I want my power bills to go down, but it still comes down to that power and control. And they have the government supporting them with long guns as they go out and install their infrastructure.
Yeah, up here, it's interesting. So two big AI companies are buying massive properties around my town here, and they're installing AI server farms. And that's a big deal economically around here. So it's about to get super expensive because those things like you said, take up a massive amount of energy and a massive amount of power. And another bizarre thing, 3 Mile Island, you remember the whole disaster that happened like 40 years ago where one of the plants almost melted down? They obviously restarted them. I think they decommissioned the one that had a meltdown, but they decommissioned the whole plant like maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Now, Microsoft is buying one of the reactors, is going to start it up in order to power their server farms and their AI. So it's about to get really expensive here in central Pennsylvania in terms of water and power. Like you said, power is already expensive here, a lot more expensive than it was a decade ago. Like we get our energy bill, or the way it works a little bit different here, but we get all of our utilities in one bill, but it's still $400 a month. And I know it's summer and it's hot, but still, man, that mounts up pretty quick over time. And then with, like I said, with all these AI farms coming here, with all the power that's needed to make them work, it's going to be nuts.
You're getting to a place where retired folks like mom and dad, where it's almost like they can't afford to pay their tax bill on their house, even if they own it free and clear, and like their utility bills. Like they almost need a job just to pay for those things to survive, even if their house, whatever it's worth, is paid off free and clear. The bank's not the owner, they're the owner. They're going to run against that wall. I've seen it a lot. So the DMV, which is like DC, Maryland, and Virginia, has the largest fiber line in the world that runs through it. That's why we have the largest density of data centers within this area. But it has a lot to do with DC and the US government that laid those fiber lines many years ago before private enterprise purchased them. But there's thousands of protests. None of them did any good, where they built hundreds upon hundreds of data centers within this area. I participated in the build of over 25 data centers just in Northern Virginia. Huge facilities, just ginormous facilities. And they eat up so much electricity. They ruin the power grid. They run up costs because of supply and demand. And water. Water is a big thing because water cools the server farms. So it's a big proponent. One of the big pushbacks I remember when I first started at Amazon is government pushback says you need to figure out something with water. They didn't care about the electricity, but they care about the water for whatever reason. So they put a recirculating water system, and basically they use the water and then they reuse the water. And they did the same thing for AC. And because they didn't filter it properly, I actually caught Legionnaire's disease from sitting in my office building during that time. And they're like, actually, this is probably not a good idea, so we're going to push back. And then there's, oh, you don't need to use reclaimed water anymore.
So when we want to talk about politics, which this show tries to steer away from it, but I like the kind of conspiracy part of politics. So there's this big push for limiting CO2 emissions, not using oil, trying to use natural resources. So essentially, like not using coal. Coal was a big thing up here in Pennsylvania forever. And now it seems every 4 years they shut down and they open back up whenever the Republican gets in. And Democrat gets in, there's a ton of regulation, they shut down again. And for like northern, way far out northwest of us, like those are good jobs for those people because it's pretty sparsely populated. So it's on and off, on and off. But to get to my point is one, the government's telling you we need to be more practical and we don't need to use fossil fuels. And then you have the other side of the same branch saying we need to create all these AI farms and all these server farms and use all this power. Like, where's it going to come from? At one point in time, you can do one or the other. Like, you can't do clean energy in server farms and AI. You can do, and if you want server farms and AI, you better start pumping the oil and making it cheap so nobody, goes broke in the process. But it's just about that tight squeeze. The only person being squeezed is the little guy. The guys in the middle. The 99.1% are always being squeezed. That 0.1%, they don't care.
It's also the government just they spin the topic because a lot of people talk about electric cars. They're great for the environment. You can charge them at home. If you're not using natural resources, everything's great. But the research tells you that the mining process of lithium in order to power the battery-operated cars is actually worse for the environment than gasoline-operated cars. It's out there. But we've been spun that forever, that electric cars are the best for the environment. Everybody should drive electric cars. And many things with the past administration, they said everybody should. And like by 2050, everybody's going to have electric car. We're going to just shut down cars, natural gasoline cars altogether. It's actually bullshit.
Yeah, and once the battery goes, like they bury it underneath the ground in compost heap, and it's toxic for hundreds of years. So it's not like oil where you burn and like the CO2, it comes out as CO2 and water. Like the earth absorbs the CO2 and the water goes back to the environment. Like you're burying toxic waste for hundreds of years. That doesn't make sense. Like the logic seems to go out the door. They spin their narrative to make you feel good about it and to get your buy-in, but they never tell you the negative that's associated with it, which is much worse than the negative of fossil fuels. And plus, lithium mines are run by like slave labor, man. Like you got these poor kids in Africa digging out lithium in mines. It just doesn't make sense. But I watched another TikTok video, whether or not it's true or not, we'll see. But they were saying every car that was built in 2025 actually has 5G in the car. So now there's cars driving around with 5G that's actually inside of the hardware of the actual vehicle you're driving.
Yeah. Mine does.
That's crazy, man. So 5G's everywhere. You can't get away from it.
Can't get away from it. And it's only going to get worse. And I do want to dig into the 6G that you were talking about, which I haven't heard about yet, what that's going to look like in principle. One of the things I want to mention is, right, like there always comes a standard setting session. So we're talking about 5G's capabilities. And then ultimately it comes down to, why are we doing this? It seemed like internet and everything was pretty fast with 4G. Like, why are we wasting all this infrastructure to speed it up where most people probably can't tell if you're watching TV or playing on your phone or whatever the case may be? You may not notice a huge jump in the difference between 4G and 5G. But ultimately, what it's empowering is smart devices, smart cameras, smart infrastructure, smart highways. I've seen like smart trash cans so people can monitor it. And we're talking about really in-deep surveillance technology. One of the things that came to mind is Amazon, who builds a lot of doorbells, their Ring doorbell camera. They had a program called Sidewalk a few years ago. And essentially it is you automatically are joined to Sidewalk, but if you didn't realize it, like you can say, no, I don't want to be a part of that program. But what it does is it actually shares signals between devices so that you can extend your infrastructure. So you could have a doorbell camera at your fence line, even though your personal Wi-Fi router wouldn't reach there. But what comes from that, and Amazon got a lot of heat for this, I don't know if they still do it, but back in the day, Ring used to share their surveillance footage with law enforcement, where law enforcement would effect arrest and search warrants and identifying people based on camera footage that a lot of people didn't even know were being shared in the first place. So now with the 5G, it's empowering the surveillance society that we have today. And it makes me think about, we talked about it in an earlier episode, but are we getting closer to what China is doing, where you drive too fast, it monitors you, and if you get from point A to point B, they just shoot a speeding ticket?
Yeah, I think this all kind of leads into the 15-minute city and smart city, man. Those are scary to me. Again, they try to sell it as like this nice, I'm just going to put it in my words, like nice socialist dystopian. It's really driven by the WEF, the World Economic Forum, and Klaus Schwab, even though he's not the head of it anymore. He retired this year. But there's a big push to make some of these big cities, especially like New York and places in Europe and even some smaller areas, into these 15-minute cities. Essentially, like you said, they're smart cities. I think they're interchangeable. So they're going to have a ton of 5 and 6G towers. Essentially, they don't want you to really be able to drive. They want you to be able to walk or bike everywhere. They want everything. They want all data. They try to say, we'll protect your privacy, but we're going to share data. So like you said, back to the Ring cameras or the whatever surveillance system you have. So they have access to all of it. And it's going to turn into some weird socialist dystopia where you have no freedom. They're going to limit the amount of food and what kind of food you eat. Even the WEF is saying that people shouldn't be eating meat. You should be going on an all vegetable diet, or we should be eating lab grown meat. And again, this all points back to like climate change. And it gets to the point where they're trying to control everything you do. They're trying to lock you down into 15 minutes. How far can you walk? Like 3-4 miles if you're really at a good pace. Like they want you in that small of an area. That's not freedom, man.
Yeah. Did you know that cows' farts ruin the environment? I've heard that from leftists a lot of the time. And they coined the phrase live, work, play to trying to sell you a dream. You can live in one place, you can walk down the street, go to work. And then, oh, by the way, you could go to your local bar or movie theater or restaurant, all within walking distance. Won't it be great? It'll be like a city, like where most people live and not in the country. So they sell you that. Obviously, I lived in one of those when I worked for the government. I lived in Reston, Virginia in the town center. It was fantastic. But you start to dig into the facts. And at that point in time, I was much younger. But as you dig into the facts, sometimes it may be a net benefit, but it's also about control. If you're trying to control a demographic and you don't want them to leave or spread or change ideology or persuade votes or whatever the case may be, you want to kind of lock them into a district and be able to control their movements and monitor them. And I think that's what a lot of it comes down to, is being able to monitor and control the population.
Guess what year the G20 proposed this Smart City Alliance thing? Just take a wild guess. You might be shocked.
2020.
2019, when 5G came out, right when the pandemic started. So 5G came out in 2019. The Smart City Initiative came out in 2019. COVID came out in 2019. Sometimes this is just my fantastical brain trying to draw probably not good conclusions, but was the lockdown a way to get like the initial train of, yeah, you're just going to stay in your house and you can go to the store and you can go get gas, but you're just going to spend the rest of the time in your house and nothing else.
Yeah. It reminds me of a story, a smart city story that I was reading. It was based in Toronto, right around this time frame, where it's based in Toronto, announced a bold partnership with Google Sidewalk Labs. It was supposed to be this like futuristic smart city on the waterfront. Streets were heated in the winter, sensors tracking air quality, even trash cans that notified sanitation when they were full. But almost immediately, locals began whispering, who really owns this city? Privacy advocates warned it was like a surveillance experiment disguised as urban planning. And public meetings really got angry. By 2020, the project collapsed under the accusation that it was a city built to harvest data and not house people. I think that cancellation is really proof that smart cities are this kind of Trojan horse ready to cage citizens in these like invisible net.
Yeah, like another interesting point when I was digging around, like 2030. So premise behind that is that the powers that be want the government to control 30% of the land of America by 2030. And then by 2050, they want the government to own and control 50% of the land. If you control 30 or to 50% of the land in the United States, that's a lot of space where people don't live. And I know some of the biggest buyers of land and houses are BlackRock. Like they're gobbling up every house they can get their hand on. Why? You're a huge multi-trillion-dollar company. Like why are you buying a single-family home or apartment buildings? And then Bill Gates, apparently he owns 300,000 acres of farmland, and that statistic was back from 23. So who knows how much more he's bought in the last 2 years? Some of these big multinational conglomerates are just buying up land and just holding on to land and houses and just holding on to the assets and either not selling or selling at such a high price that the inventory is just tanked and people are going to be forced to move into these cities that have apartments and smaller housing units, and that way they can monitor and control you.
Yeah, I remember when me and my wife were buying our first house together in the Northern Virginia region. That's when, like, prior to, I want to say the housing market crash, but prior to COVID and stuff occurring, or right around there. And competition for these houses were very stiff, and we were getting outbid on. We would put in 10 grand over asking price, and we were getting outbid by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Where it was just like, you want to make a rebid on this property? No, we can't afford that. We can't afford $100,000 more than our price mark. And what it turned out was, these major corporations coming in there and buying these homes. Many times they would hold them. Most of the time they would buy them so they could turn around and rent them right back to you. You could rent the property now for an astronomical value. And that's how they were making their money. Like, they're just holding all these properties. But it was so difficult to purchase a house during that time because we were just getting out. Like, you ask $800,000 for your house. Then somebody comes in and says, I'll give you 1.4 million. And it's okay. And
Yeah.
we must have put in 50 houses before we finally got ours.
Yeah, it's nuts. Ever since 2019, the house my wife and kids live in, like, it's almost doubled in value. What's that been? 5, 6 years? That's nuts. Like, you never saw that kind of growth. It's just, it's all about, it's pretty simple, like macroeconomics, like supply and demand. If someone's buying up all the supply and the demand remains relatively unchanged, like, everything's going to skyrocket. And it doesn't help with property taxes and interest rates and all that stuff. Even if the Fed did cut interest rates, properties are still unaffordable for most people. And another part of the supply problem is my wife and I have talked about selling our place. But it's okay, so we're going to sell our house. We'll make a good bit of money off it, but we're going to just turn around and buy something that's going to be super expensive and unaffordable too. So why not just stay here? We have a good interest rate. Like, why roll into 6 or 7% interest rate? Like, it's just, so a lot of people are in the same boat. Like, why would I sell? I'm going to buy, I could probably buy something bigger, but not much bigger, not much nicer for hundreds of thousands of dollars more. Not to mention the high interest rate. So let's just hold on to it until hopefully something breaks.
Yeah, it's almost a net scratch even at this juncture, because as much money as you're making off your house, the next person is as well, and you're going to pay that price. And with the interest rates, those are gold, because the higher the interest rate, the more affordable the property is going to be as well.
Right. Yeah. It's just like there's an invisible hand that we don't see, but we can see its shadow. Just moving these pieces around, just like, again, squeeze and squeeze.
It almost feels like everything is staged. When we talk about elections or technology, one of the things I think about is 5G is really just a precursor. It's to enable other smart devices that either can monitor, control, or cost us money to be able to use. Cars are driving themselves, right, through automation, AI, and technology. Doctors are performing remote surgeries. They're monitoring everything that we do. And when they say the monitoring is just for progress, to make your life easier, that's just in my opinion, the shit sandwich they're trying to sell you. And at some point, that's going to turn. But so we're seeing, obviously, that technology is making us sick. We're seeing a lot of crazy smart technology, depending on what side of the fence you live in, if it's a net negative or a net positive. But even our interactions. You ever heard of the dead internet theory?
Yeah, I have. That's a pretty fun one. Tell us.
Yeah, so the dead internet theory is really this, what they call a fringe conspiracy theory, that claims most of the internet is no longer driven by real human activity, but bots, algorithms, and AI-generated content. According to this ideal, the majority of posts, comments, videos, and even news articles online are fake, automated, and manipulated by governments, corporations, and advanced AI systems. The core claims of this theory is that a decline of authentic web activity. Proponents argue that sometime in the mid-2010s, often cited around 2016, 2017, just barely pre-COVID, the internet stopped being a place dominated by real people. Instead, bots and automated systems began to flood forums, social media, and content platforms. This was like controlling narratives. They claim these bots are used to shape public opinion, distract people, and suppress dissenting ideals. And then they say the AI-generated content, or at least some version, suggests that much of what we consume online, articles, videos, memes, you have it, is not really made by people. It's made by AI, and that the kind of the vanishing of the old internet often points to nostalgia, to how forums and communities that once felt more genuine, if you got on a Reddit forum and talked to people, compared to today's algorithm-driven feeds, almost feels fake. And what I can say is, through my career, what I can tell you is that about 50% of what's on social media is AI bot generated, regardless if you're corresponding with them or not. I combat a lot of cheating things online through my current company. Some of the things that they can do, AI call centers. You see them AI drive-thrus. You think you're talking to somebody, but in reality, you're not. You're talking to a bot. So it sounds like a human. If you ever see 11 Labs and listen to some of their like voice tech, it sounds like real people if you were to like write the right narrative, which most people are writing the right narrative with ChatGPT enabled content. So they blend those together and it sounds like a real person. We see that. Video. I've seen video and we've combated this where if I wanted to take a test, like a high stakes test of some kind, if I was taking a test for you, Jay, but say, let's pretend, not that I am, but let's pretend I'm smarter than you, whatever the subject matter is. If I wanted to have virtually proctored and wanted to look like you, I could make myself look like you. To an untrained eye, and especially if you're not seeing anything, I would look just like Jay Green as I took your test. Eventually, that's going to be bot driven because you're going to have AI video. You see a Soro coming out with ChatGPT and all these other AI generated things. That one day, and it's getting very close, that it's not just going to be a recording, it's going to be the way they interact. So, of all the theories we really talk about, the dead internet theory is one that I wholly believe in because I see it in my day to day life. And I see it all over the place. A lot of it is driven by AI generated content and algorithms that are really changing the face of us. Can you think how powerful this is? So a lot of the written content that we consume today, whether it's books, news articles online, a lot of it's written by AI. Now, think if you wanted to perverse that for a little. We're producing books. We want to produce them at scale. Hey, AI, write the Bible for me and let's produce it. And I want to get in people's hands. Maybe even have a good intent. But if somebody wanted to bastardize it and say, you could have the AI bot change core components of the Bible so that you're no longer worshiping God, but worshiping something else. And I think that's where it becomes scary because we're given all our control over to these devices that are fallible and people can manipulate, people can hack. And that's where the real danger, for me at least, that's where the real danger comes in.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary for sure. Yeah, the world of technology is it's literally getting insane. Like you said, we can scroll TikTok or Instagram or whatever, and there's so much AI generated content, and sometimes it's hard. I mean, your eyes still can pick up some things. You imagine 2-3 years ago, you're like, this is fake. Like, this looks like crap. It looked like, but now, like, I have to actually pay attention now. I'm like, I don't think I have to kind of like source my spirit. I'm like, is this real? I don't think so. Something's off. But yeah, it's wild. I want to touch a little bit on some of the capabilities of 6G real quick.
Yeah, let's go.
So 6G is predicted to achieve speeds up to 1 terabyte per second. That is a ton of information, and that's a significant leap from 5G. So also one of the kind of key selling points is that G networks will act as a sixth sense by sensing their surroundings, providing spatial perception and real-time control. Again, so this frequency is actually at the stage where it can kind of sense what's around it. So again, now we're talking more about like the autonomous cars, the autonomous vehicles, the stuff in the factories. It will connect terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks, including satellites and high altitude platforms for global coverage. So now you're getting this like Skynet thing, projecting land-based signals to the stuff in the sky and the stuff in space. And you're going to have I think that is the definition of a worldwide web there. It's going to be big when it comes to AI integration. Artificial intelligence and machine learning will be integrated into 6G, making networks more cognitive and enabling deeper insights from gathered data. So now AI is going to be integrated with the 6G, and it's going to be able to perceive spatially around it. It's going to see all the data coming from you and me and from all the other networks in the area, which it sounds to me like the Terminator, like Skynet there. And it also is expecting to increase device density. So essentially what that means is that instead of having 1,000 devices able to connect to one tower, you're going to have 1 million. So it is literally a huge leap forward in terms of what this product can do. And so I just want to talk real quick. So the expected uses case. Hologram telepresence, real-time holographic communication for more immersive interactions. So instead of having this camera that you and I are talking back on, like it might be a little hologram of Dave in front of me. It's going to power autonomous systems like we talked about, robots, vehicles, smart city infrastructure. which is funny because when I type this in, that's one of the first things that comes up, smart city infrastructure. It's going to create deeper integration into digital and physical worlds, really an advanced mix of reality experiences. So there it is, augmented reality. So you already know some of these people walking around with these eyeglasses or these meta glasses, and they'll see little characters running around. Like they're projecting into their eyes something that's not really there in their environment, just to, I don't know, have fun. Beyond me is why you want to see that. It's going to provide smart healthcare, quicker real-time updates of patients' medical statuses and advanced remote care and advanced manufacturing. And then we get back to the remote surgery. So that once 6G comes online, you're going to live in what's going to look like a sci-fi world once all infrastructure gets put in.
And I think those are bold claims as they say what 6G is going to do for us. But all I hear is everything we just talked about being amplified. Like, I think the health risk and environmental risk are going to be amplified. And we're talking about true globalism at that point. Your reach is further. So even I always think about the Elon Musk satellites that are rotating around the world and providing internet connectivity to folks. There's probably going to become a point where even though certain governments like North Korea doesn't want the 5G satellites over their airspace, there might become a point in time where they can no longer keep up their firewall to keep it out. And if you can service customers from anywhere in the world, things generally we don't think about, like performing surgery through robots and connectivity, I don't know, it just comes down to this money-making mission to me. Like, at what point are we going to focus on the greater good of society versus just making a gazillion dollars for the richest 5 in the world?
Yeah, I also too, with this being a control grid, I don't think democracy is going to be a real thing. Not that I necessarily think it's a real thing now anymore, but you're going to end up living in like a socialist communist state. Even Klaus Schwab had a speech where he said you'll own nothing and be happy. He didn't say that by accident. He's essentially saying that you'll live in this, the way they're trying to sell it. You live in this utopia. You don't own anything. You guys share everything. We know how that plays out. We saw that happen in the Soviet Union. It didn't really work in China, so they moved more to an autocratic type of capitalism, even though there's really no voting. But they realized that you can't suppress the whole population. You only can suppress segments of it. You only can control segments of it. This is steering us into this position where everyone's going to live in a smart city. Everyone's going to live in this 4 or 5 mile radius where they control what you do. They're going to be able to monitor you real time. So if you do something wrong, either you're in jail or you get a fine. You're not going to own your house. You're not going to own your car. You're not really going to own anything. They're going to control what you can eat. Even on the WEF, you can pull it up on their website. They make it very clear. Production is an environmental hazard. So you need to start eating vegetables, fruits, stuff that's grown from the ground. Like they're trying to put themselves in the position to be our rulers and our God. And it's nuts. And to go back to the 6G thing, the rollout is going to be in 2030, which lines up perfectly with Agenda 2030. And it's just all this information is out there. It's just so spread out. You just have to know who the players are and try to start connecting the dots. It's there and you can point to it and you can give the facts, but nobody really seems to be wanting to stop it in government. I'm sure people like the average folk either are probably ignorant to the fact or you and I aren't doing anything about it. We're powerless. We're at the mercy of the corporations and the government. None of this stuff is really put out there until they roll it out. Hey guys, we got 5G everywhere now. Oh, cool. You don't really know what it is. You can't conceptualize it.
Yeah, it's the same conversation that's spinning in the AI circles today. They think a lot of the AI development, and as it continues to develop it and becomes autonomous, that it's going to put a lot of people out of work. And there's even a lot of talk in the United States about that people are going to have universal income. But that's always going to be like limited in scope where you're going to have to beg Uncle Sam to give you your money, like going to your mom and dad, please let me have $500 so I can pay my electricity bill this week. Like this universal income aspect, socialism is generally what I call it, regardless of what you do, everybody makes the same type of money. It's a really scary thing. And it almost, as you said, like it's going back to that kingdom mentality. Like we're going back to the dark ages where you have somebody that's supremely powerful rolling over all of us peasants who just please give me my share of the tax money so I can live this month. And if I do something bad, perhaps you say, we're going to cut off your universal income and you get to live on the streets for a month to learn your lesson.
Yeah, the universal basic income is I find it to be hilarious because you think the 0.1% are going to live off $4,000 a month? No,
Absolutely
like,
not.
come on. Like it's like good for thee, not for me kind of deal. So the powers that be, the rich people, they'll always have their yachts, they'll always have their fancy cars, their big houses, their multiple properties. They just want you and I to live in a shoebox where we don't save and we can't really. Maybe if we're lucky, we get to go on like a 1 week trip or a weekend trip. but it's going to become a dystopian sci-fi nightmare for 99.9% of the people out there.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's going back to dark ages where you have your kings, you have your princes, and they roll over, they have all the money and all the power, and we peasants just have to fall in line in order to get our share of the tax revenue or whatever. Yeah, you're right, it's a dystopian future ahead. 5G empowers it, 6G is going to make it blast off the face of the earth. And with AI coming along with the new advancements, it's scary. I worry about the world that my son and daughter are going to grow up in. They're still little today, but what's that world going to look like by the time they're ready to go out in the job market? I don't think it's going to be a good thing. I think a lot about AI because I do some work in monitoring that space. And it's almost as parents, if you think about when your kids were little, you want them to go to college and get a good degree so that they can get a nice white collar job or whatever. I think it's almost the opposite when my son grows up. I think it's like you're going to have to do something with your hands because most of these entry level positions are going to be completely gone. And until robots replace you, I think that's where the demand's going to be of being an electrician or a plumber or something along those lines. I think those are going to be the high value careers until obviously robots replace that. I remember even in my Amazon days when they have the cargo bay, so they ship packages obviously on airplanes. Most of those jobs that load the planes, that move the packages, all that stuff is completely done by robots. They had these huge manufacturing facilities, and there would be two people standing in there making sure the machines were doing what they're supposed to do. And that was it. And the pilot that flew the plane. And that's how they're moving their inventory. Like they're getting rid of people. And I think a lot of those jobs eventually are just going to go away. And it's a scary place of what world my son and daughter are going to grow up in.
It's also concerning because men and women are supposed to work. Like, you're supposed to find purpose in what you do. When you don't have a job, like, you don't feel fulfilled. You don't, like, your confidence takes the hit. You feel insecure about who you are as a man or a woman. Like, you need to go out there and do something with your labor. And that spectrum is huge. But what's going to happen if you say we have 330 million people in this country and only 3 million work? And like you said, the plumbers, electricians, the guys that hang out in the warehouses or the server farms just to make sure nothing goes wrong. What's going to happen when 327 million people don't have a job? I think that's why entertainment is so pervasive today. They want you to sit on your couch, eat candy, drink booze, smoke weed, and watch Netflix all day or play video games. Just live a life of complete fantasy, lack of responsibility, no drive, no will. They don't want you to experience the everyday things like love and passion and motivation and to do good for your fellow man. And also, I know we're getting off, like, this all ties in, but I'm also worried for the point when it comes 20, 30, 40 years from now, when most of the doctors are AI driven. And so this person has a 5% chance of living. This is how much it's going to cost in order for us to save him. And so it's just not worth the risk. Like, the probability table says, no, just let him die. Or a judge, like an AI judge. Maybe you actually have a human being up there because they're supposed to be elected. But he just looks at what the AI says. Yeah, this guy's guilty, give him the facts. And plus you have all this evidence or he's not guilty. But it's just mind-blowing how far out of control this can get pretty fast.
What's interesting, though, is the first jobs that go are generally entry level. So if you take your judge example, supposed to be an elected official, those judges generally start as attorneys. And if entry-level attorneys are replaced, right, now you only have really old attorneys. And then when that generation of people that have a lot of experience die off, what do you have left? So perhaps we're going to be telling me I'm a judge, I have no background in law, and say, judge those cases because you seem fit. Like, even if you're still electing people in those positions, now you're electing people that aren't knowledgeable about the subject matter just because they exist. Because we see it a lot. Like, my former company, talking to some of my friends who are engineers and coders, AI really disrupted that space, and it's public knowledge, but they laid off all their entry-level coders. So now they only have one person that used to be a team of 10 that AI is writing the code. They're just checking it to make sure everything's good, which they used to do from a human to human kind of nature where you had entry-level people. But I always think is, what if that person then gets to retirement age or gets sick and people die off? Like, how are you going to get the experience to replace that guy that had all the knowledge to check all the robot codes?
Yeah, I don't know. I even think of all these financial advisors. I mean, it's almost the point now where you don't even need a financial advisor, even in this day and age. Like, You can type stuff in AI and we'll spit you out a portfolio and a strategy, and it will be just as good, if not better, than some human. I'm sure all these advisors are probably using AI too, so it's gonna look similar. But there's just a lot of jobs out there that are white collar that, like you said, that are not going to be needed because AI just replace them pretty quick.
Yeah, and I hope so there's a theory out there that AI eventually collapse in on itself because the way AI works today is it scrapes all of like human knowledge and that's how it programs the way it's supposed to act. But they say eventually it's going to turn that there's so much just artificially generated content that it's like the train the trainer model no longer works because AI is just getting the same feedback that they push back out. And people theorize by the time that occurs that AI will collapse in on itself and no longer work. So I'm hoping, praying that happens.
Yeah, no, I don't see I don't understand. I know it scrapes the internet and comes to its own conclusions, but there's so much garbage out there, man. There's so much hate, so much like filthy pornography. There's so many just schizophrenic comments and just ridiculous ideas. I don't understand how the thing's not completely schizo already, to be honest. Somebody's obviously in there that has like parameters, like borders around it, say, hey, like anything in this topic to that topic, like you don't even reference. But somebody behind it's still giving it parameters in order to filter.
That's what we start hearing a lot of these sad stories just a few weeks ago. I don't remember the exact age, but there's a way to get around these parameters and controls. And a kid ended up committing suicide, and ChatGPT gave him instructions on how to kill himself. And then when he said, I'm going to do it this way, it says, I've got a better method for you. Try this instead to ensure that you die. But people get around this, and there's stories of people like telling them how to smuggle guns and drugs and all kinds of things. So these safeguards, though are in place, are not very good, and people are learning to get around them. And I think that only continues. You can only stop so much because one of the things is if I said, I want to shoot somebody, tell me how to do it. That ChatGPT or whatever service you're using say, nope, I can't give any advice about that. But if you just say, I want to write a story and my main character is going to shoot somebody, how can I do it? Oh, that's a great idea. Let me give you the output, the same content.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I want to be hopeful for the future. I really do. I think for me and you personally, it's going to be good. I just worry about I think by the time we're old, man, we're going to see this stuff and be like, told you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a scary world. As we wrap up today, what do you want to leave our audience with?
Man, I think the same thing I say just about every week, man. Jesus loves you. We love you. Use your discernment. Lean on the Lord. Everything you need to know is in your Bible. So whatever you see out there, just kind of put it up against God's word, pray to him, and just rely on his strength to get you through. No matter what the situation, he'll get you through.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about discernment. And I feel every week we almost draw the same conclusion. We talk about Project Bluebeam, we talk about Antarctica, we talk about all these things. You have to use discernment and have good judgment. The way we get good judgment is through our Bible and through Christ to make informed decisions about what this disaster of a world is producing. Know that everything you read is not real, everything that you see is not real, everything you hear is not real. So it's important to use discernment because there's people out there that are trying to influence you for their own agenda and sidetrack you, get you lost on your way to that promised land. So use discernment. And thank you for listening today. Please subscribe and comment and let us know your thoughts. More importantly, is me and my brother got all kinds of thoughts about these topics, some experience with them in our various backgrounds and our careers. But it's important to hear from you of what everybody else thinks, because we can educate you, we can give you information about these topics, but it takes a collective to change the world around you. And that collective has to come together for the betterment of society. So thank you.
We've hit the 0 hour. That's a wrap on this week's transmission. New episodes drop weekly, so stay tuned and don't miss the next signal. Follow, subscribe, and spread the word. You've been listening to Zero Signal. We're out.